Welcome to Meet the Masters of Insurance webinar series. I'm Lawrence Geller, the founder of ForAdvisorsOnly.com. We began this series in January of 2024 with Barry Pascal, and over the past year and a bit, we've had just over 50 Masters of Insurance who we've interviewed as part of this series. And we've really noticed that it is possible to become a success in our business with diligence, integrity, and experience, and that anyone can succeed in this business with hard, thoughtful work. And we've also noticed over this period of time that there have been a number of similarities in terms of how people have become successful. And one of those strongest similarities is that people have had sales managers, mentors, or coaches who have helped them to learn the business. And some people, many of us, have had combinations of several of these over time. When we spoke with Sim Gawkar a few weeks ago, we discovered that Sim currently has 3 coaches to make her mentorship program, or her personal mentorship, as successful as she possibly can. And in thinking about this, I tried to think of who I knew who had the most worldwide experience in this area. And of course, that was Jim Ruta. Jim has been a friend of mine for a long time. I've known him probably for pretty close to 45 years. He's a well-known life insurance industry thought leader, a keynote speaker, and a coach. He's a former successful agent and trainer and executive manager, and he's known worldwide as the re-energizer, because he ignites success in new and experienced advisors and managers alike. It comes naturally to him because he's one of those rare coaches who's one of us. He knows the job from actual experience. He started in the business by selling over 100 lives at age 22. He then managed a top career agency, including one of Canada's largest, with 250 agents and 15 managers in the heart of Canada's financial district. And he then set up 2 general agencies. He's been coaching and consulting top advisors around the world since he gave up working in the corporate world. He's addressed many global advisors, including 5 times MDRT annual meetings and the main platform. He's a regular industry columnist. He's an author of 4 books, including 2 bestsellers, and he has 2 more on the way. When we thought of forming the Canada Sales Congress and bringing back the idea of a sales congress, Jim was the first person who I spoke with, because Jim had been the one who had planted the seed by constantly bemoaning the loss of the Ontario Sales Congress. And Jim has continued to be the greatest contributor to the Canada Sales Congress ever since. He's the president of AdvisorCraft Global, which is headquartered in Burlington, Ontario. He's dedicated to inspiring insurance advisors by enhancing their confidence and ability to serve clients effectively. His enduring passion to help preserve, promote, and propel the noble profession of selling life insurance is evident in everything that Jim does. In noticing this similarity among agents and what they've done to become successful, and the relationship between sales management, mentorship, and coaching, there seems to be some nexus. And so I'd like to bring Jim in now. Good morning, Jim.
Hey, good morning, Lawrence. Wonderful to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure always. So, Jim, tell me, you've been a sales manager, You've been a mentor, and you've been a coach.
Yeah.
What is the nexus among those 3 professions?
Well, I think it's a great question, and it's one of those things that keeps me in business all the time, is this whole idea that when you started, when I started, going back, to the dark ages, you did have a sales manager. A sales manager was that person who kind of put the walls up, showed you what the job was supposed to be. If you had a great one, they actually took you out on joint calls and for joint, field work, that sort of thing. So you kind of got the rule book, if I can, just sort of bring it back to that. That's kind of how to do the job you got from your sales manager. Now, later on, I think what you find is you needed some sort of mentor. And I look at it this way, that the sales manager kind of gives you the rules, but the mentor that you had is somebody who would interpret those things for the real world. They would help you apply it to you. They would make it seem like, okay, no, oh, now I get it. Because sometimes you might get stilted language from a sales manager, and it's, you weren't really sure, but, I had a guy across the hall from me, and God rest him, Ray Van, many years ago. I said this to you the other day. He used to call me Hot Shot because he had a tremendous sense of irony about him. And but he would tell me what it really meant. And that combination of what the game is from your sales manager, and then what that really means for you on the street with the people, talking to people, was invaluable. It's what I miss about the career system. Now, the coach, if you add the third part of that, is somebody who can maybe do both of those roles, and that would depend on the nature of the coach. Some coaches are maybe sales coaches. I tend to do a lot of sales tactical stuff. Some are maybe more personal development types. So they maybe play a little bit of both roles, but it depends on the individual coach. But those two roles in general terms, what's the game and then how to interpret the game, those things are still needed more than ever.
Yet at the same time, and here I'm thinking of the 1970s and 80s when we started in the business, there was something called the Life Underwriters Association training course.
Yes.
And that taught us the very basics of sales, starting with something called You'll Earn a Fortune.
Yeah.
And how to use Granum, how to put little check marks in the book. And we met with people, and we had somebody who was somewhat senior to us taking us through the course. Is that replaced with coaching as well today?
Well, I mean, I doubt it, because what was cool about LUATC, LUATC 1, and LUATC 2 was that, and I coached that. I did that many times as an agency manager, sales manager, that sort of thing. I did that a lot of times. But you'd have, how many people did I get? 7, 8, maybe 10 or 12 people in a room. So you had this team building thing, even though they were all competitors. We kind of got together. And again, what was cool about that, I thought, was there was like standardized ways of doing this. You could count on, at least if you were going through LUATC, 1 and 2, that everybody was kind of playing by the same, is this the right word, sales rules? You know what I mean? Everybody kind of had the same idea about how the business was supposed to be. So coaches will do parts of that. Indeed, I do that with my clients, and at various levels. Obviously, LUATC 1 and 2 was early on in your career, 1, 2, 3 years, that sort of thing. So I don't get a lot of those people, but I get some. And for them, you've got to kind of give them that basic stuff too.
So someone in their first couple of years, they're on their own, unless they have an MGA who really does have a good educational process in place. What should they do to try to replicate, if you wish, the LUATC program?
Yeah, I think there are some supposed duplicates or replacements for that through various associations. I think they exist, and I think it's a challenge to do. But I do think, 1, find a coach. 2, find programs. I think draw on the people with sales experience at your MGA. I mean, look, partly, when you're in this business, and we've always thought of this, Lawrence, you and I for sure about, and I think everyone that's really does this for a living as a profession, look, you're really in charge of your training and development. You're responsible for what it is that you have to do. I used to tell agents that they had to learn to develop what I called independent professional capacity. And it didn't matter what I told them at the Mutual Life of Canada or at Confederation or Canada Life. Look, you're independent. Oh, yes, I know I've got my meat hooks into you somehow. I get that. But you've got to be in charge of what you need to know, and you have to be in charge of making sure that you get it. And that was true even in a career situation. So you have to be independent, you've got to think about what it is you need to do, and you need to find the people that can get it. Professional always means that it's always to help somebody solve problems in the biggest way. They have trouble. How can we fix that? It's not about helping yourself. I remember many years ago, a speaker came to an LUA meeting in Winnipeg, And he said, a lot of advisors, they talk like this. They say, Mr. Prospect, you have a problem and I am your solution. But what really comes out from them is something more akin to this. Mr. Prospect, I have a problem. I don't have any money. And you are my solution. I think you have some. And that split can't ever happen. It's just that important. So independent professional, because it's always about them, and then capacity. You have to do the work. You've got to put in the units of work, as my buddy Bruce Etherington will say. You've got to do the job. So I think you can duplicate this thing. I think it's a little bit harder because, LUATC, your manager said, Geller, you're going. Ruta, you're going. And it cost you whatever it was, $300. What? I was making $1,500. Well, that's too bad. That's the way it goes, right? So I think you can duplicate it.
Sorry, you talked about the collegiality of the LUATC class, the group of people, agents, young people who were all together and learning together. Is that a good time in the first couple of years then to create a study group or join a study group to try to replicate that collegiality aspect?
Absolutely. What a great comment, a great observation, because here's what we discovered in bringing new agents into the organization. If you could bring two together, now that's a small study group, but if Lawrence and Jim joined together, I would push Lawrence would push Jim, and we would go. I only wish that were true, because I would have been doing what you do instead of what I do. But so it was good. And I think there's a great opportunity for relatively new people to get together, because you see, if 10 of you get together and say, we need somebody to teach us this part of the sales process, this part of some technical thing, what's this IFA thing I hear about? And why do so many hairdressers seem to buy it right now? Anyway, that I love the look. Well, apparently that's actually happening, and it's not a good thing. No, but the point is, you could then bring somebody in, even if it cost you a little bit of money. 10 people at a few dollars will get you all the advice you need, and you won't be making mistakes like IFAs for hairdressers. But that sort of idea, I think, is a great one. It helps. You can work together. It's one thing to let yourself down. It's another thing to let your comrades down, your partners, your friends, your colleagues down. I think it would actually help a lot of people be more successful more quickly and last longer too.
Another thing you talked about with the LUATC class then was the moderator, the older person who was walking the younger people, the newbies, through the course. So would a study group be a good place to invite older people to join, maybe a mentor or two as well?
You know what? If you can find somebody that would want to do that, I mean, that's a marvelous thing, because they only have to show up and ask questions, render opinions. That's all they need to do. They don't even have to prepare. It's not like, if I'm having a meeting, I have to prepare and be ready to do all sorts of things. But a lot of it is just, you're as a more senior advisor, you can just, be there to guide the discussion and maybe, make sure that that doesn't go off the rails. I think that's a great idea. I think a lot of when I say younger, we're not dragging in a ton of young people like we might have many years ago when I was 21, when I walked in the door the first time. But newer people would do well to find somebody. People like are on your master series, and these people are all across the country. They're all there, and these are not the only ones. There's lots of them. So it would be a good thing to get the perspective of the masters, of the senior people who've got some battle scars, who understand what the job is, and they could mentor you without even being mentors, if you know what I mean, which is, I think, what the moderators did in LUATC.
Yeah, I think you were perfectly right. I mean, having done it, that was certainly what the role I tried to fill. Yeah. And I think you probably did too. You talked about something else though. You talked about really sort of stories you alluded to. And when Lori Power was on, she talked about how her first sales manager, her first mentor and sales manager, actually loaned her a few stories because she didn't have any of her own.
Yeah.
What's your attitude about stories?
Wow. Well, look, I have lots of friends. Let me just say this. Much of what I say, if it sounds any good, I stole it from somebody, so forgive me. But honestly, this is a words, stories, questions, and passion business. And and Lori's getting lent stories are very important. I have told many stories, personal stories that people still use. In the day, I had a binder of what we used to call motivating stories, and they're just situational. See, I think sometimes you can go, well, they're not mine. I'm being dishonest. This is not transparent. I'm being duplicitous. You can make up all kinds of great words that sound scary, but sometimes facts are one thing. But if you can wrap a story around it, it delivers it more effectively to your prospect. People love stories. So, by the way, it's the right words, the right questions, and the appropriate stories. My daughter is on this call, and she has a story about when her mom passed away. And that was an extraordinary story. And the one thing that I pull out of that, and forgive me, Catherine, but the one thing that I pull out of that is, when I got to her, when it was a very traumatic evening, of course, but her one question was the question I had heard on how many videos, which was simply this: Daddy, will we be okay? Daddy, will we be okay? And it was the weirdest thing because I was so worried about my daughter on one hand, and I swear at the same time I'm going, oh my goodness, I have heard this on video, on those slideshows and videos. That's what actually happens. And if you can tell those stories, you can communicate what really matters, because it comes to another point. And I like to say this, and I get people arguing with me, but bear with me. Said, look, nobody needs life insurance. You don't need any life insurance. The reason is simple. There's no mandate, not here, nowhere, no place. I speak all around the world. I'm going to be in Romania in a couple of weeks. I just came from Cyprus. I've been in India. But nobody needs it. You only need it if you want to take care of your family. In my daughter's case, my ex-wife's life insurance saved the day. Daddy, you know what, Catherine? You were okay. It worked out, at least financially. So at that point, what was a personal tragedy did not have to become a financial catastrophe. And that's what it does. And so, to tell stories like that, to be able to connect with people, because stories are what connect. That's why we watch television. And by the way, stories that last 30 seconds, 15 seconds on TikTok and YouTube and Reels and Instagram and the rest of it, those are all stories. And by the way, half of those are true either. But they get the point across. And that's what we have to do.
Isn't it also how we learn as kids? We learn from allegories, from fairy tales. We learn about morality, about ethics, about what's right in life. Is that how we naturally learn?
This is absolutely true. I'm just sort of looking around my studio, but I can't find it. I pull out a book all the time. It's called The Little Red Hen. The Little Red Hen story is about she wants to bake bread, but she has to till the soil and plant the seeds and water the seeds and all this stuff. Anybody want to help her along the way? No, we're very busy right now. But at the end, everybody wants to eat bread, and it's a great story about the business. So that's a story that I learned when I was about the same age as my grandson, Benjamin, who's on this call. It was something that I learned at that time. And you realize, what, if you want to eat bread, if you want rewards, you're going to have to put in the effort. And you're right. We learn that as children. We learn that all the way through life. And man, if you can tie this together, by the way, it makes the job a lot more interesting and a lot more fun. It makes you more interesting. And that is what attracts referrals and introductions and more business and repeat business. That's what does it. If you can be interesting, people will be interested.
That then brings me to something else. You're a real proponent of prospecting.
Yes.
Not a prospect, you have no one to talk to. How can telling stories and talking with people be a prospecting tool in your mind.
Yeah. Well, let me start with the beginning here. Is one of the great stories from Al Granum. You mentioned the Granum system years ago. And Al Granum used to say, look, doesn't matter what you think you do, you're a prospector first. Whatever you call yourself, you're still a prospector. And he said that 60% of your time had to be dedicated to prospecting and promotion, which is all about finding people. I'm reminded very quickly of my friend Sanjay Talani out of Dubai, who he tells, when somebody asks him what he does, he tells a story. He doesn't say he's a $1 zillion producer, because he is. Doesn't say that. You know, what he would say, he'd know who he's across the table from. And he would be able to tell the story like this. He would say, thank you for asking. I just love what I do. Just the other day, I was working with a young family, because I'm sitting across from a family man. So working with a young family with a large mortgage and lots of issues with their family in terms of financial, liabilities and that sort of thing. We were able to put together a program for them that made them feel good, that gave them peace of mind, helped them to know that they would be okay in their moments of truth, that they'd be able to get past all of that. It was just an extraordinary thing. Just makes me feel so good. And what do you do, Lawrence? And so rather than saying what he did, he explained the value, the feeling that they had. Robert Herjavec talks about that the very best salespeople sell, sort of explain or transfer feelings, wonderful feelings. So there's just a simple example. So, but prospecting, is, and there's a few parts to this, I think, that really need to remember. Now, Simon Sinek says you have to know your why, and that good, I get that. But here's something more important in terms of prospecting. You need to know your who. Who is it that you can connect with, that you want to connect with? And really, any strategy that you might want to promote and any market can be, especially if there are viable numbers for you. So that's always a thing. But I think, who am I going to talk to? In your case, certainly early on when you and I met, going back to it might have been 82 or something, 83, maybe earlier. But the point I'm saying is, you worked with lawyers, and it was very interesting. And you've since developed all of that into extraordinary business. But you knew who. Now, when you know who, you also know what, where, when, and why you can help them. And to me, this is the setup for prospecting, because you've got a prospect. We say we have no one to talk to. I get people with 20 years experience. Well, I have no prospects. Do you have any clients? Yeah, I have 800. Have you called them lately? Well, no, I don't know. What? It's like I'm speaking Greek to these English people, and they go, well, what? And I'm reminded, you and I talked about this the other day, when COVID first hit, my first thought with all of my clients, my coaching clients, was simply this: let's start making phone calls. Because I knew in 08, 09, when the market crashed 29%, something like that, when, with the problems in the United States with all that mortgage stuff, advisors kind of hid under their desk, had to stay low, don't get involved, don't cause any, and it was terrible. They lost business. It was an embarrassment. I said, so here's what we're going to do. We're not going to hide. We're going to go at it. And we asked 3 simple questions. It was, are you okay? Is everything okay? And just go with that. Do you need anything? And 3, do you have any questions? That's all you had to ask. And then I said this to you the other day, and it was so cool to me. I managed to talk to Tony Gordon in England. Tony, what are you doing? He said, well, all we're doing is asking 3 questions to all of our clients. Are you okay? Do you need anything? And do you have any questions? I talked to Van Miller in Milwaukee. Van, what are you doing? You sell 1,200 cases a year. What are you doing? Well, I'm just keep phoning. Are you okay? Do you need anything? Do you have any questions? And the irony of all of that is, they never stopped doing that. That wasn't something they were doing new. They always did that. And that, to me, is what all of us can do. You're looking for prospects? It's like my dad used to say, you need a helping hand, Jim? Look at the end of your arm. Like, you're right there. And people want to hear from you. You know, Lawrence, Jim Ruta, your insurance guy, are you okay? How are things going? What's up now? Hey, how's business? Whatever, anything. It's that kind of simple discussion. You see, and a lot of us think we're calling our own clientele with crafty, salesy questions of some kind, and I just don't know what they are. I couldn't possibly do it. No, it's as simple as anything. It could be the simplest thing. And so I look at it that way. And, you know, it's funny that it hardly even matters what the problem is in this business these days or ever. And this has always been true, is I don't know what the problem is. It doesn't matter what it is, but the solution is almost always, if not always, see the people, like Ben Feldman said, or call the people, or write the people, or make contact. Right? Now, are there snappy ways of talking to people you don't know? Sure. You were talking the other day, and I thought this was very cool. Back in the early days of all of our careers, a lot of us would be making cold calls on small business owners, like small business owners, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 employees. Because for that, it was like you have group benefits, and then you'd have like owner benefits. It'd be like the same deal. But sometimes we forget. And I think sometimes that in the prospecting realm these days, we sit back too much, and we hope that our Facebook ads or our, you know, our Google AdWords will attract business. And while that can work and does work, clearly, you have more control than that. You can do something right now. Does that help?
Some years ago, you had the great Tom McQuillan on your IETV program. And Tom is one of the greatest prospectors I've ever met. He does it by observation. He goes down the street in the morning in the back of his car, and he writes down names and he calls them. For those people who have call reluctance, as I did early in my career, the great Bob Gould Sr. taught me that selling disability insurance with future income options meant that every year I had an excuse to call people. Are people doing that now?
You know, it's funny, you just hit on a really important point, Lawrence. This idea of personal observation, and you're right, Tom was an amazing guy. And Tom wasn't the only guy that did stuff like that. You know, I think about guys that sit in the back of their car. You know, Frank Crean would have been doing similar things like this, and God rest him. But you know, it was, you know, personal observation. You drive through, even when you're driving your own car, you know, you pull up as a nice construction vehicle pulls up to you. Boy, that's a Geller Construction. I should call these guys. This is a very neat truck. Whatever. We don't think about that. We don't make lists. You know, learned a lesson years ago from another coach who said something like this. He said the average client, the average advisor has about 8 to 10 prospects that they plan to see and hopefully sell in the next 3 weeks or so. That's the average advisor. Now, the average top advisor will have between 150 and 300 prospects they plan to talk to and sell in the next 3 years. You see, you can't get them all today, but if you keep working, you will get them all. And there are crude jokes about things like this that I won't repeat, but that somebody will know. And all I'm getting at is that we have to realize that prospecting is not an event. It's a process. It's something I learned many years ago, Lawrence, that I thought was so cool, is that you're not just, you don't go prospecting, you prospect as you go. So you could be in, sometimes I have a Walmart around the corner here, and Rhonda might call me and say, Jim, we need a bag of milk. Can you get a bag of milk? I go in there and, I'll almost always run into something or somebody or get an idea at a Walmart. Yeah, it can happen. So you can prospect where you go. You're a dentist, your doctor, your accountant, something else, that sort of thing. Prospect as you go. Personal observation, huge. And I think today, Lawrence, to your question, grossly underused, because people expect somehow that they should be able to sit in their office and then people will phone them. Yes, oh yes, I'll sell more insurance. Absolutely. I'll be right over. Well, as they say in the farm, that dog don't hunt. It don't work like that.
almost guarantee that after you have about 2,000 clients, people will call.
Something, yeah, of course.
You need to make the first 2,000 clients on your own.
Yeah, that could
You-
take a few weeks.
You said something else though, that seems to me to be very important. And I was taught it 45 years ago by Barry Reebok and John Ferguson. Barry is still with us.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that if someone is a good prospect today, they'll still be a good prospect tomorrow, even if they don't buy today. As a matter of fact, they might be a better prospect. Because the more times you speak with someone, the more they just assume that you're their insurance agent. And so when they have a problem with their insurance, even if you didn't sell it, they may call you.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Like,
something.
well, wasn't it you and I talk on occasion, and it wasn't it you that said that your one of your biggest cases took like 9 years to close or 9 years to work out? Like the close didn't take 9 years. It's not like you opened it but it took 9 years to get to a point where you could actually do the business. See, I think we forget that. You're exactly right, Lawrence. This is exactly right. You know, and Barry's point, and I used to work with him at Imperial myself when we were with Paul Leonard back in the day. And interesting man, but he's absolutely right. If I call you once, now when I call you the next time, you know my name. See, I'm doing the work. I'm putting in the effort. You know, there's a story out of the U.S. for Verizon Mobile, and those commercials used to walk around. You know, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? That was that kind of commercial. And that guy, by the way, for those of you who are wanting to know, his name is Paul Marcarelli. I'll often ask an audience, anybody here know Paul Marcarelli? Nobody. But here's the point. That's what it is like in prospecting. I phone Lawrence. And it's really whatever I say, it's, can you hear me now? You see, because if Lawrence is ready to listen, then today could be the day. But Lawrence has just had, he got a flat going into work. He was late for a meeting. He had a bad, something happened. Not ready today. So it's all about making the calls. And, I'm reminded, you talked to my partner, Mark Halprin recently. And but so many top advisors will say just what he says, which is, I will keep calling a good prospect until they tell me to go fly a kite. And then you said once, it says, yeah, or I decide I don't like them anymore. I don't want them. Well, what if we had that approach to this? You see, the reason you can do that, the reason Mark can, is because both of you know that you help. You're doing something that will make a difference. If they only understood it, they would want it. And that's what all of us have to have. We have to have that enduring belief that we do good. We're not just making money in this business. And that when I hear that kind of talk, and you hear a lot of it, well, look at, you can make a big, make a million, make 100,000. I mean, 8 figures, the left-hand side of the decimal point, Jim. I'm talking real money here. It's not about that. There's an interesting thing. Paul Bates, a former president of Schwab Canada, many years ago, tells the story, and God rest him, he's passed, I believe. But he used to tell the story. He used to have he was a stockbroker, but on his desk he had a blotter, and he wanted to make $10,000 in the day, $10,000 a day. And every time he made a call, if Gelder bought something for it, made him 1,000, he'd cross it out and make it 9,000. Then he would go through. End of the day, if he got to zero, good day. And then we were asked one day to speak with his assistant's mom and dad, and they were kind of middle income folks. And the assistant said, "No, Mr. Bates, I know that they're not really your prospects, but they really need help. Could you spend an hour with them? I would be so thankful." And he goes, fine. And he does. And they were the nicest people. And we're so thankful that you can. And he said, I learned something that day. And he was a very spiritual man, Paul Bates, it turns out. And God love him. But here's the thing. It turned out that instead of putting 10,000 as a goal on the top of his blotter, he changed it to just 10. I want to help 10 people today. And you think about that. What if we just helped 10 people a day, 5 people a day? Barrington Gray from RBC, one of the top, sort of in-house kind of estate planning guys, says, I want to help 5 people a day. So he can improve his income or his as good as it is already, and it's ridiculous. What if you make it 6? You can add 20% to the deal, right? What if that? But that can apply to you. How many phone calls will you make before you quit? I used to tell people, what if you just did one thing every day, just one, to find a new client, a new prospect, a new one, not an old one, but a new one? What if you just did one thing every day? At the end of a year, you'd have done 200 of those calls. And I don't even care what you do. Because maybe you just do, maybe you phone them because you know them. Maybe you send them a text. Maybe you send them an email. Maybe you drop in. I don't care. But I think we have to realize that, because the job that we have today, and there has never been a better time to be in this business than right now. And the goofier the economics get and the politics get, and I don't know, we're testing new highs here in terms of goofy, as far as I can tell. It's getting weirder and weirder. But that's when people need you and your calming effect on their essential financial security more than ever. And if you can just approach them and keep asking, you know what? One day they'll say, yeah, I hear you now.
Yeah, for years now, I've said I sell security, not securities. And
See,
that's
what a great line. Write that down. Everybody write that. Forget about everything else. Write that down. I sell security, not securities. 100%.
the other thing, going back to the beginning of this particular part of our conversation, is that you call somebody for once and they're a cold call. You call them a second time, you're no longer a cold call. They know who you are.
Right
and
on.
you don't have to talk about insurance, because you always start, as your friends do, as Tony does, with how you doing, how's business going? What have you done interesting? You know, as I get older, and boy, I tend to get older sort of on the same pace as everybody else, a year at a time. I learned that if I can make a positive difference in somebody's life, just one person's life, in any given day, it's a good day. Even if it's my life, I make a difference in. And you know, that's part of what you're saying as well. We have to do good by doing well, or do well by doing good, as Mark.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I actually wrote a talk about that in 1982, before the days of computer overheads and PPP, whatever, PDFs, and when there were still transparencies.
Yeah.
But in order to make these prospects, to get people to think favorably of you, what sorts of conversations do you have to have? What have you learned around the world that's a similar, as you say, a best practice?
So look, one of the things that I've talked about this before, but a little, but we've kind of developed this idea of revelation questions. The issue around questions is so important. And I've been told you need to ask questions more than anything else. You don't make statements, you need to ask questions. And the trouble with that for me has always been, and like I think I've told you, Lawrence, my problem is I'm a slow learner. You know, if I just live long enough, I might actually know something eventually. But right now, every day is a learning experience for me. And so but I look at it and I think, you know, what are the right questions that you can ask? And I go back to my buddy Van Miller in Milwaukee, who would always ask open, like very interesting, directed sort of questions. And he had several approaches. One of them was, you know, what do you want to happen when? So he'd be, what do you want to happen when you get sick or disabled, you can't work, your income stops? What do you want? What's your plan for that? What do you want to happen to get a heart attack, stroke, or cancer, and your money stops? What do you want? You know, what's your plan for that? What do you want to happen when you retire? You know, what's the plan? You know, what do you want to happen when you can no longer take care of yourself? What's your plan for that? What do you want to happen when you die? So there's that sort of question, but there's a better kind of question, even better than that. And it's kind of something that you can do. You know, Lawrence, it's Jim Ruta calling. I was chatting with Barry Pascal the other day, and he mentioned your name. I need to ask you just one question, if I could. And if you can ask the right, what I call revelation question in this case, and you may have a little more wind up than that, so forgive me, but I'm trying to make it fit, is to say something like this, is say, you know, if you could rearrange your assets such that you could minimize all the estate taxes your family would ever have to pay, and you could transfer all of your money to your children and your grandchildren the way you wanted, and you could eliminate the silent profit partner from all your investments? Would it be worthwhile knowing how to do that, even if you couldn't do it all right now, today? And it's questions like that that people will, they either get it or they don't. That might be a little bit longer version. There's another one. If I could show you, if there were a financial structure you could put in place, Lawrence, that allowed you to convert taxes into charity, would it be worthwhile knowing how to do that, even if you couldn't really do it right now? And they go, well, you can convert taxes into charity, Jim? I said, yeah, in fact, I can. Would you be interested in knowing? I'd like to. Tell me. No, look, I could tell you, but over the phone, but I got to say something. It's really important here is that me telling you about this idea is kind of like me sending you scissors and a comb and sort of instructing you on cutting your own hair. It's going to work out predictably bad. So when in the next few weeks can you carve out 30 minutes for me to drop by, or for us to have a Zoom call or a Teams call or whatever, so I can show this to you in some detail? What makes sense to you? So the reason I say this is because if you can ask questions where you don't take on the rejection personally, then you are more inclined to make more prospecting calls. And that's all you really need to do. That's what you need to do, is make prospecting calls. So to your point earlier, yeah, I have 2,000 clients. Great. Awesome. And if I just called them, and Bruce Etherington's got a line on this. He says, I'd like to drop by and it's time for your annual review. And by the way, your policies may not have changed much, but you may have. Your family may have. Things have changed. Bruce, to this day, he tells me he gets a ton of his own business from just doing policy reviews. We mentioned the other day, what Toby Hull told David, who's also been on this program, David, about making calls. Always ask the question where no means yes. No, Mr. Geller, would you have any objection to reviewing your life insurance policies with me? It could be as simple as that. But here's the point. If you do it once a week, you'll never be good at it. It'll never work. And you'll say, well, I tried that yesterday. It didn't work. Like someone was, I used to say, well, we're going to send out direct mail letters. And the guy said, well, I sent out 10 last week and nobody called me. So screw it. That doesn't work. Nah, that's not the way that goes. By the way, just on direct mail, in case somebody's asking, if you don't send out at least 1,000, you do not give the process even a chance to work. So just as a side note, right? And then it's a question of repetition. So we have to keep on doing that. And, it goes down to something else. And it's something we talked about a lot, is the idea of simplification. Einstein said that if you don't know, if you can't say it simply, you don't know your material well enough. He also said, and simplicity is the highest form of sophistication. See, and that's why that the professional takes the complicated and makes it simple. The amateur takes the simple and makes it complicated. We have to strive. That's why focus and specialty is so important. That's why a ton. Look, first of all, people don't really appreciate, well, maybe some don't anyway, just how bright you are. But even in the disability market, let's say that's only this wide, but you're 15 miles deep, but you're this wide in the disability market. And we need to be better equipped that way. So we have all the answers. I had Alfonso Franco I was talking to the other day on critical illness insurance. He has the words, the stories, the questions, it's just bang, bang, bang. Unbelievable. He doesn't get that from doing it once a week. The average client advisor in this country, the average business attached to an advisor on average is less than 5 life policies a year. 5. Now, I get that's not really an accurate number because a lot of those are convenience licenses, and I get all that. But 5? And I talk to a lot of even successful agents. If they can do 10 or 20 in a year, they think they're killing it. What happened to 100? That's why in my introduction, it says I sold 100 lives my first year. By the way, if I didn't, I would have been fired. I was see you, Ruta. Yeah. In fact, I'll tell the quick story on that. Here's what happened. I got to the end of the year and I had like 86 sales. And my manager called me in January, like I knew it was coming. He says, Ruta, 86, remember there's a rule here, you have to do 100? I go, yeah, yeah. He says, I want you to take this information, go back to your office. I want you to think about why I should keep you here at all, because you couldn't meet the objective. I go back to my office, I start thinking, I realized that I had like 17 or 18 joint cases. Like it was, Lawrence and Lucetta, God rest her, right? Jim and Rhonda. There's a whole bunch of, Catherine and Ryan. I go, wait a minute, this is my angle. I go back, well, actually, Oscar, what it took, I thought you meant lives. So in fact, I covered 103 lives last year, and it wasn't just slick, Ruta. Okay, you're in. And that was the end of it. But that kind of activity, I have a friend who talks about being a life insurance activist, which I'd never heard until recently, an activist. He sells a lot of apps. That's what he does. Kind of a neat thing, but it's not that you're just trying to do business. You're just trying to help a lot of people in a world today where we need more of it than ever. Advisors are so valuable, so important, and especially life insurance advisors, because nobody's doing that. That's not the key thing. Everybody that I talk to, they're all playing, with their millions and millions of dollars. This is where I'm making my money, and it's hurting the industry.
Let's go back to the basics.
Sure.
Let's go back to how to get appointments. And I think here of our old friend David Keller. David had a question. Do you eat breakfast? Will you meet me for breakfast? I'll pay. I'll be sitting at the Intercontinental Hotel, or I'll be sitting at the Inn on the Park. I have a table reserved. I'll meet you there at 6:30 or 7:30 or 8:30. I mean, David used to have 3 breakfasts a day. You talked about somebody who has 3 lunches a day. The last one at 5:30 in the afternoon. Everybody eats breakfast or lunch. It's also, by the way, a great way to get together with a mentor for the first time. Offer to buy somebody a coffee, lunch,
100%.
whatever.
Get off your backside and get out there. Make the contact. I think you're right on. Back in the day, and I think it's still today, you still see this business being done. And I think anyone can do this. It may just be a coffee at Starbucks, which was about the same price as the lunches I used to buy when I was, in 1981. But having said that, that's a huge thing. Like you said, do you have breakfast? Do you eat lunch? Everybody has to have a lunch. Why don't you drop? I'll buy. We have to invest in ourselves. We have to invest in our prospects. And I think you said this the other day, and it's so true. It's really hard to hate somebody sitting across from you when you're having dinner and they're buying you lunch. It's really difficult to do that. And we just need to do more of it. And so offering to do that, I just think you'll learn a lot by, looking at I think about the natural market. Where do you have natural influence? Where are the people that you talk to? Who are these people, and who will listen when you talk? Who will take your advice when you give it? When they call, you'll want to hear from them. Who are these people? And let's connect with those folks. The big thing around this, there's a lot to do with this on do people get it? And not everybody gets this. They don't understand insurance. They don't understand. They may not care the same way you do about your family or about their business. They don't care, and you hear this. I remember years ago, someone said to me, if you think I'm going to spend $108, this was a deal back in 1979. If you think I'm going to spend $108 a month on insurance so that my wife can move in with my neighbor when I die, buddy, you got another thing coming. It ain't going to happen. I remember being devastated, not as devastated as his wife, who was sitting beside him. But I think there's an old one.
Mary Lou Taylor, to her credit, many years ago, said that the answer to that question is, no, buddy, you're paying $108 so your wife doesn't have to move in with your neighbor.
Yeah. Well, let me just pick that up because it was a really cool story. Because I used to, when I was 32 years old, I had $2 million worth of life insurance. And people used to say, I mean, that was a lot in, 35 years ago, whatever it was, a lot of money. People say, Ruta, you're crazy. You're worth more dead than alive. That's an unbelievable amount of money. And I said, well, He said, why would you do that? I said, well, it's simple. It's simple. That kind of money will give my widow a better choice of daddies for my kids. Right? Because rich widows can do what they want. Poor widows will make bad decisions. That's why. And I think that goes to another point, Lawrence, that we've talked about before. And I talk about all the time. I talk to some of my clients, some of them, one of them the other day, very young guy. I said, well, how much insurance do you own? Zero. He said, none. I said, zero? How can you, when you get people like you mentioned, George Sigurdsson has been on this program as well. And what is George will even pull his policy out. Here they are. Lots of people do that. Some will have just a sort of a one-page, list of here's what I've got and and all I really want you to have is number 7 here. This one here. I'm looking at this. And if you don't think you're bragging when you show your life insurance portfolio to a prospect, then you know what? You probably don't have enough. And I want to remind you of one other thing. Remember, your life insurance portfolio is the last thing you will ever say to your family. And that as I say that, it chokes me up because it's true. When Rhonda's dad passed away, his life insurance portfolio said, I love you guys. You guys matter to me. I spent money I could have spent on other stuff, but on you. And we have to remember that. And so whether it's getting the appointments, I think if you have that in your mind, then I think everything changes. Revelation questions. Yeah, got a quick question. You could do cold calls. I've got a quick question. If there were a way you could do a benefit, would it be worthwhile knowing how to do that even if you couldn't do it right now? And you say, well, that doesn't always work. I know nothing always works. But it's kind of like the story of the turtle. Behold the turtle. He only makes progress when he sticks his neck out. Stick your neck out. No guts, no glory, no risk, no riches. We need intestinal fortitude, visceral aptitude to be great in this business. And your customers, your clients, your prospects are counting on you to have sufficient faith and belief in the product and the service you provide that you'll call them. And not just once. Well, screw him. Doesn't want to talk to me. I'll never call him again. No, that was just that one time. Barry's point right on. You're a better prospect next time. Hey, it's me, the guy you hung up on last time. Remember that? And off you go. Lawrence?
Hey, it's me. Last time we talked, you were really unhappy. How are things going now? You talked about something I call acquired knowledge. And that is what we learn over time, what we have learned in 45 years. We talked to you the other day about Malcolm Gladwell and his 10,000 hour theory about how long it takes to become an expert. But you're not an expert. You're not.
Yeah, that's about 10,000. You're in.
10,000, you're the expert. Every day along that 10,000 hour spectrum, you're learning something.
100%. 100%. But give yourself a chance at it. Give yourself a chance. Do the work. Put in the time. I was talking to a guy in San Francisco one day, and he said, I said, well, how do you practice some of your, you have a new angle, a new prospect, a new strategy on somebody. I said, who do you call? He says, well, I have a record of all the people I've ever talked to in the last 10 years, all their numbers, all their stuff. I have a record of all of that. He said, when I want to test out a system, I just call people who've already said no, but I keep making the calls. And I think that's a big part of this. Let's keep at it. Let's not stop. Let's not slow down. The world needs advisors today more than ever. Often when I'll start a presentation, I'll say, how long does it take for the average person to be a life insurance professional? And I get people put up their hands, 5 years, 10, 20 years, 25 years. It's like a sort of a strange sort of auction. I said, no, none of those answers. I said, the average person will never be a life insurance professional. Because it takes somebody above average, somebody with persistence, somebody who can stick to it, somebody who has consistency built in, somebody inspired to help others, somebody who has the right communication. You're right when you started off this process today to say, yeah, if you've got enough diligence and you work at it, just almost anybody can do this. But I have to tell you, I don't think everybody can. And I think not everybody can be awesome. But you know what? We can be a lot better than we are. And if you love the business, and I can't say enough of that. Bruce Etherington talks about working with Meraki, Meraki. It's a Greek word, and it means it's like a labor of love. Your soul, your heart is in the business. And I got to tell you something. If your soul is not in this, if your heart is not in this, if you'd rather be a doctor, well, then you know what? You should go be a doctor, or you should go do something else. Because if you love this business, you asked me the other day, I think it was you anyway, said, no, would you do this for nothing? I said, of course I would. In fact, half the time I do it for nothing. Here we are today, doing it for nothing. Why? Because it matters. And if you think the safety and security of the people that you work with matters to you, if you love them, what does Bruce say? You've got to see the people and love them. Some people go, that's so hokey, Jim. Jeez, I don't have to love them. Here's a definition of love that works perfectly in that situation. A state of love exists when the safety, security, and satisfaction of someone else matters to you as much as yours does. Wow. Okay. So could you love your prospects? Yeah. The concern I have for them, same I have for me. I'm as worried about their kids as I am about my kids. And I just hope that they can do what I think I would do if I were them. Make sense?
That reminds me of something else I learned from a sales manager years ago, which is that the best client is somebody where you smile when you talk with them. You call them on the phone and all of a sudden you're smiling. And he said, if you smile every time you call somebody, you'll like the clients and you'll want to do good business with them, and they'll see the smile over the telephone. I mean, it was a little bit strange concept, but it turned out to be true.
But it's all that stuff. Look, the trick is we were told, and I did this, everybody in our office had a mirror in their office. Everybody in our office made phone calls standing up. Why? Because I'm looking at my mirror, and you can't look at yourself in the mirror too long, which is like, if I'm looking at the screen, gee, what a weird looking duck. But you look at yourself and you're smiling, and they can hear the smile. You're absolutely right. And, it's like you've just got to find, if you know people, if you love learning to meet people and learning to know people better, this business is so amazing. The limits are unbelievable. There are really no limits at all. None. No practical limits to what you can do. I've got a friend, 326 times top of the table. Okay, that's not me, not you. It's not, but that's pretty good. But MDRT is kind of, to me, the basic standard in this business. And whether you join or not, it's not my point. The point is that's talking about around 100,000 of FYC. Because that's kind of where you've kind of made it. And if you can get there, man, you can do anything.
You talked about 100 lives in your first year. Barry Reebok had a rule that you had to be MDRT at the end of your first year. And he out and help you sell the last couple of policies if you had to. We're coming up on the end of the hour, Jim. We always end with the same thing, which is, what advice would you give to somebody new, whether in the business or in any other business?
Well, I think, first of all, you've got to have faith in yourself. You've got to believe that you can do this. And I think we have to work at just know that if you put in the effort, you'll get the results. That the effort is this is about the effort. It's not about the results. So put in the work. I think sometimes we can be slowed down by our lack of results early on, and that can sort of slow us down. But if we know what we're going to do, we're committed. That's why I like the idea of specialty, Lawrence, and focus, because, okay, I'm not trying to do too much. Be careful. And frankly, I was lucky that this was advice that I had in an old career system, which was just mutual life at the time in the day. And the four pillars were still up, everybody was still sort of hung around in their own neighborhood. That if you can do something you love to do. This is I guess the great line from Confucius, although likely not in English. When you find something you love to do and at which you excel and for which you are well paid, you never have to work a day in your life. And you know what? Just believe that. My faith carries me an awful long way. I give glory to God. That's, to me, what really matters. And it's helped me. It's helped me to understand the bigger picture. I can also tell you many of the very best advisors have faith in it, not necessarily Christian faith. They could be Jewish, they could be Islamic, they could be Muslim, they could be but there's something bigger than them. And for me, it's about putting the work, make the calls, see the people. Even if you don't know what you're going to say, go out, get yourself in the trouble. I'll tell you a quick story. I hired many years ago, Gary Dornhofer, used to play for the Philadelphia Flyers, won a couple of Stanley Cups in the late 70s. And he was like, he said, what do I know about this? I said, don't worry. I said, just make the calls, see the people. And when you get into trouble, i.e. you don't know what you're talking about, phone me. And that's what he did. And he made MDRT in his first year. And that's how that goes. So I think, by the way, something you said about Barry, if someone had said to me, you've got to make MDRT in your first year, I'd have made it. Because the expectations, whatever you think you can do, you can. And if you think, look, what's that story? If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And
it's the same as assumed consent. Everybody would do it. You mentioned how difficult it can be in the first couple of years in the business. And I'm reminded of something that my second greatest supporter, my mother, said. She said, when you start in this business, pretend that you were in school for 4 more years getting a professional degree. Any money you make is serendipitous. It's a total bonus. Because if you were in school, you'd have to work outside of the school hours. You'd still have to do the work. So do the work, earn what you can, and learn constantly. You said it earlier. Every day in the business, you learn. To that end, next week, Krista Barzo will be back. She did such a great job with Lori Power. She's coming back to interview Blake Waddell next week. And that should be very interesting. Blake has had a stellar career in group insurance and in the broader market. The following week, I'm sorry, let me just go to the list. The following week, we'll be joined by Dean French, an equally interesting conversation. Then Jamie Bongard will be with us, Greg Abbott, Don Kibblewhite, Lauren Curry, which should be very interesting. All of them are very interesting. Then the great Robbie Wildman. We talked about sales management and the nexus with sales management and mentorship.
One of the best. One of the best.
Robbie was all of those. He was a sales manager, some of the best in the world. He was a mentor to many of the best in the world. And he's still with us. So we can share in the wisdom that he taught people in the 80s and 90s, and that should be fascinating. I thank you all for joining us for the Meet the Masters of Insurance webinar series today. I thank Jim Ruta for joining us and sharing his wisdom. Thank you, Jim.
My pleasure. Thank you, Lawrence, for inviting me.
And Krista Barzo, as always, for your technical service. We'll see you next week at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for Meet the Masters of Insurance webinar. Thank you all.
God bless.